Has a woman ever falsely accused you of something? Yes. As I was going through the divorce proceedings from my first wife, she brought a claim to court. She had an emergency room complaint. It said that she suspected my son had a venereal disease. In court, her verbal complaint was that he, our son, had anal warts and that I had done unsavory things to him. As such, there was a temporary order stopping me from seeing him. I was sent to a urologist to be tested. I was clean. The court ordered a physical and mental test of my son. No signs of any kind of misconduct. She didn't show back up to court as the divorce was final. But the custody was still in question. So the matter was dropped due to lack of evidence. There was another son who I never got to see due to this. From the time that he was born to the time that he was buried, this son was mine. And it still hurts a little. Even though I never even got to develop a rapport with him. I wasn't even aware of him until he was born. He was born with immature lungs. He cried a lot. According to my son. He says that he was holding him, feeding him, changing him. At the age of 3. The official cause of death was SIDS. But both my son, I suspect otherwise. Jump forward a couple of years. I had been visiting with my son on a regular basis. My ex-wife had been in and out of homeless shelters with my son. She asked me to take care of him for a few weeks while she got her stuff straight. This was in May, just a few days after his 4th birthday. Come the end of July, I had not heard back from her, so I sought her out. She was still in no position to take care of him. She had her benefits cut off because she claimed that I had not been paying child support. But I showed up with receipts for support, much more than the court required me to pay. I was still required to pay her a minimum while I had him, so I bought money orders at the appropriate time and hung on to them. No way to pay her if I couldn't find her, but I wasn't going to be caught out not doing my legal duty. I kept them as evidence of my attempt to pay her, even though I physically had him anyway. I sought her out in July and told her that I needed to get him enrolled in Head Start. In order to do that, I had to have custody so as to get a physical from the doctor. I convinced her to sign the papers. I took them to court and was given legal custody. I enrolled him in Head Start. I found out that he was already a year behind other kids who had been in Head Start at the age of 3. I managed to help him catch up, but he was through kindergarten by the time he did. He was still not potty trained at the age of 4, but I managed to help him correct that. He was so much happier. He told me that when his mom and friends over, she would lock him in his room. On one of my visits, I had noticed a lock hasp in the outside of his bedroom door. She had told me that it was there when they moved in on another visit. At that time, I took him to the park. Upon returning at the agreed upon time, my ex-wife and her boyfriend were passed out on the couch. It was about dinner time. Unable to arouse them, I looked through the kitchen for something to make for him to eat. After finding nothing, I took him to McDonald's. When we returned, they were able to be aroused, just barely. It was about dark. I waited around for bedtime. I put him to bed and I drove the 80 miles home hoping that things would be fine. Supervised visitation was still in effect for me from the previous complaint, and I didn't want to rock the boat and cause even more difficulty in seeing my son. Elsa would have taken him home with me. At the time, I probably would have been arrested for kidnapping and lost all privileges to him. If I had instead I made the 80-mile trip 2 or 3 by 1 week to see him a few more years into the future. My ex has a daughter who was born addicted to special powder. She lost custody of her. Fortunately, for the little girl, she is being raised by the mother's adoptive mothers. I later found out of the girl's father. She has had ADHD issues but is doing quite well being raised by those 2 wonderful women. The father died of a special powder. Odd. And the mother only sees her at the occasional birthday party. Forward a few years. My son is old enough to cook for himself, so I let him spend weekends with his mother. She has another child with another boyfriend. My son comes home and tells me that he and his little brother basically spend the weekend in the back bedroom where he takes care of him while his mother and her boyfriend have guests in the living room. He became rather fond of his little brother and wanted to continue to go just so he could ensure his brother was well taken care of on the weekends. My son is barely 9 at this time. A couple of years go by, my son's visits become less frequent. Multiple excuses on his mother's part despite the fact that I always brought food and drove the 80 miles both ways in order to drop him off and to pick him up. Eventually, the police busted a meth lab at their trailer, and both the mother, my ex, and father go to jail. My son is horrified, mostly because he wasn't there that weekend, and he was worried about his little brother saying that he should have been there. The father takes the rap, and the boy is returned to my ex. She goes through some stuff and ends up living in a motel room. The cops are called about a child wandering around alone. Someone witnessed the child getting a severe beating. She loses the child. Court proceedings ensue. She loses custody of the child. Being her second time, the state removed her right to have any children, even terminating her rights to my son. So this is my story about how a woman's false accusation backfired and turned out for the best for me and my son.